stepping down at the White House. Members of Congress asking for more information about possible White House interference in the AT&T deal to buy CNN's parent company. Then there's that Fox News reporter who we just mentioned, the former Fox News reporter who demanded a release from her NDA. All of that fallout from Jane Mayer's story, or perhaps connected in various ways. But let's begin with this debate conversation. The Democrat National Committee saying that Fox News will not be considered as a partner or as a host for a Democratic primary debate. We know so far NBC and MSNBC have the first debate in this summer. CNN has the second one. Fox not on that list. Joining me now, Media Matters for America President Angelo Carusone, Democratic strategist Tara Dowdell, and veteran political analyst and author Jeff Greenfield. Angelo, what was your reaction to Jane Mayer's story? It didn't say a lot new, but what it did is it tied all of these strands together. 2 years worth of conversations about Fox as a propaganda arm of the Trump White House. Why did this story matter so much, you think?
I think partly because of the storytelling and that it validated. And I also think that behind the scenes, it's a really big moment for Fox News. It's kicking off advertising season right now. And the major story that Fox News is saying is, we know our primetime hosts are a little bit out there. We know our opinion people are out there. But our news is real news, and it is dependable and reliable. And so this story really cut directly against the major narrative that they just started selling.
They've really been emphasizing the news division. My view is, yeah, they have a news division. It's relatively small compared to the huge opinion division, which has all the highest rated shows, Fox and Friends and Hannity, et cetera, et cetera. Both exist, but it's getting really uncomfortable for both to exist in that same body. So, Tara, why would Democrats have even considered going on Fox in the first place?
Well, I think, first of all,
for a debate,
for a debate, I think that Democrats want to attract as many people as possible. So I think that's why it might have been under consideration. But here's the reality. Democrats have not been participating or having Fox News as a media partner in debates prior to this decision this time around. It should not be surprising, and it should not be the least bit controversial that Democrats made this decision. It is a rational decision based on facts and a cold, hard reality.
Jeff, your view?
I think they're missing a golden opportunity. Let's assume that Fox is state TV. If during the Cold War, Andrei Sakharov had somehow been given 90 minutes on Soviet TV, uncensored, unblockable, without reprisals, to make his case, would he have taken it? This was a chance first for the Democrats to call out Fox on precisely what it does that violates journalistic standards, without fear of being interrupted. Second, one of the things that's different from 2016, Democrats have learned who they are not reaching that they used to reach to. And not everybody at Fox is a Kool-Aid drinking Trumpist. There are a lot of marginal voters there. And if you want to win an election, you should be able to make your arguments beyond your base. I think the Democrats are already in a little bit of trouble because they're so anxious to appeal to their base. So it has nothing to do with respecting Fox as a real news institution. Say this is a forum that would have redounded to their political benefit.
To their benefit. Tara, do you think so?
As someone who's worked on campaigns, I can tell you this. The best way to persuade a voter, and all the data supports what I'm about to say, is face-to-face contact. So if Democrats want to effectively reach voters who do not share their political views, the best way to do that is to go into those communities. We as consultants, we have access to voter files, so we know where registered Republicans are, where registered independents are. So you can go into those communities and have a face-to-face conversation with them, which is far more likely to generate a positive result. So why would we invest in something? Democrats should invest in things that work in terms of reaching voters, not an outlet that has proven itself to be, as Colonel Ralph Peters, who was a commentator, a frequent commentator, said, he left because it's become a propaganda outlet.
Angelo?
My concern is that by participating in this debate, it validates a lot of the narrative that's not true about what they say. And I do think it's important to speak to people that may not be persuaded by it. I think the problem is that with the Fox viewer, they are seeped in this because the misinformation and the extremism is not quarantined to their opinion shows. If you look at every single major narrative, Uranium One, the Caravan, there's a near exact symmetry between what's happening on their supposed news programs and what's happening in their prime
for
time.
goodness sakes, Ed Henry, who's one of their top correspondents, co-hosts their weekend conservative talk show. There is so much blurring of the lines every day on Fox.
This is exactly why you have a chance to break through this. If you can reach 3 million people at a time. Look, when John Kennedy went to the Houston Ministerial Association in 1960, all of whom were opposed to a Catholic in the White House, and then took that exchange that very tough exchange, and used it in political advertising, it helped, I think, tremendously. Look, I worked in a few campaigns myself before I became a Virgin journalist. And one of the things that I think was most effective, whether it's on TV or face-to-face, is saying to people, you and I may have a disagreement. Here's where I stand. And I think it is, as I said, tactically, it doesn't validate Fox. In fact, it's a chance for the Democrats to say,
But Hillary Clinton did many she did many interviews with Fox News.
And Fox wouldn't say many, but she at least gave a few.
She did do a town hall, and so did Bernie Sanders. Both of them gave a town hall.
It never had an effect.
So then what's the problem with doing a debate with 3 journalists in which you use that forum to say, here's why your network is poisoning the conversation?
I think because of what's in the Jane Mayer piece, which is that it's shifted from being politically biased and politically aligned to something different now, more akin to a propaganda outfit. And that means I think it's a much more dangerous beast, and you have to deal with it differently as a result.
There's also an argument about media solidarity, and hosts on Fox have been making this argument, saying people like me should be defending them and standing up for them to host a DNC debate.
But what if we said that about doctors? What if we said a bad doctor who does something terrible, other doctors should stand up for that doctor? That's a ridiculous argument. I'm in PR. People criticize PR professionals all the time. If they're worthy of that criticism, then I agree with it. Here's what we know about Fox, and this is what matters. It's a revolving door for talent from Fox coming into the Trump administration. We know that there's Heather Nauert. There are many Fox contributors who are now working within the Trump administration. Roger Ailes actually was advising President Trump for a period of time following his departure from Fox News. Bill Shine, as has been widely reported, as we all know, who just stepped down, was working there. This is something completely different, and it's something that's dangerous, and I don't think it makes sense to in any way validate this as normal.
Would you have had Andrei Sakharov go on Soviet TV in 1973?
Would I have had on?
Soviet TV was a total state operation of a totalitarian vicious regime.
It still is.
Would you have had Sakharov, had somehow that opportunity emerged, would you have had him go on Soviet TV for 90 minutes to tell the Soviet people this is a totalitarian dictatorial regime? Should he have taken that opportunity?
Look, I'm not going to engage in something that was before I was born. But what I will say is that at the end of the day, we know. I want to talk about what we know right now in the present, here and now. And so I think what we know here and now about Fox News is that it is it's basically completely aligned with the Trump administration. What we also know is there are other ways that Democrats can reach voters who don't agree with them. There are podcasts. There's all kinds of new media. There's all kinds of people or channels that can be distribution channels that can be used to reach those voters. So why wouldn't we use those channels?
I think there should be solidarity in certain situations. If a Fox News reporter were blacklisted from the White House the way that Jim Acosta was, we should all stand up for that Fox News reporter. But in this case, I think this is a Democratic National Committee issue. Yes. Fox's fight is with the DNC, not with the media. And I thought it was interesting, Angelo, that so many D.C. reporters were coming out supporting Fox, taking Jeff's view, right, about going out and going on Fox. There was a kind of, I don't know what that was about.
Well, if you think, even it was reflected somewhat in Fox's response. I mean, what they said is that the DNC is banning Chris Wallace and Brett Baer and Martha McCallum. They've made it very personal. They've personalized their sort of defense here. And I think in that case, it's not so much about solidarity for some journalistic principles. They're helping out their friends, which I think is understandable for why they're doing it. And I also think that's part of it. And the other thing is part is they're not making the separation there between that it is possible to have media solidarity, to defend free speech, to defend the profession of journalism, and in this context say, I do not have to advocate for Fox News to be a debate partner for the DNC. I do not think those two things are mutually exclusive, and I think it's important to make sure that those lines don't get blurred.
My view of this is tactical. I don't think there's any First Amendment right to host a debate. I think the DNC can pick its form. My point is, tactically, I think they're blowing it.
And we will see, maybe in a couple years, if the Democrats regret this decision. Maybe we'll find out after the election. To our panel, please stick around. Quick break here, and then more on some of the fallout from the New Yorker article about Fox News. We'll talk with the congressman who wants records from the Trump administration about possible interference of the DOJ.
Line with code BC now. I'm feeling good. Own the Now with Vistaprint.
Has President Trump been using the Department of Justice to attack media outlets that he doesn't like? That has been a question practically since the first day of his presidency, given his opposition to AT&T's deal to buy Time Warner, the parent company of CNN. And in the new reporting from Jay Mayer in the New Yorker this week, she says that Gary Cohn and John Kelly were in the room when Trump railed against the deal and insisted that Gary Cohn had to call the DOJ and make sure the government sued to block AT&T from buying CNN and the rest of Time Warner. Now, as you know, the government did eventually sue. The DOJ always denied that there was any political interference at all. The deal eventually went through, and now CNN is owned by AT&T. But because of this new reporting in the New Yorker and from other outlets, there are new questions about whether Trump tried to interfere, whether he tried to abuse his power in that way. And now Democrats in the House and the Senate say they are investigating. Congressman David Cicilline is one of them. He's requested more information by writing a letter to the DOJ. They want to get a hold of records from the White House and from the DOJ about any of these contacts that might have happened. So let's talk more about it with the congressman. He's joining me now from Providence. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. Tell us more about what exactly you're requesting, what documents you do want to obtain.
Well, Brian, good morning. We should remember when this was first reported some time ago, I asked Attorney General Sessions directly before the Judiciary Committee whether the White House or anyone on the president's behalf had reached out to him in connection with the AT&T Time Warner proposed merger. He refused to answer my question. The chairman of the committee at the time, Mr. Goodlatte, refused to require him to do that. So this has been a longstanding request. We then made requests for documents from the administration with respect to any contacts between the White House and the Department of Justice. Mr. Nadler and I have renewed that request with a new letter based on Jen Mayer's reporting, again, asking for any documents that relate to any conversations between the White House, the administration, and the Department of Justice with respect to this. This is very disturbing. Antitrust enforcement is law enforcement. And in the same way, it would be completely inappropriate for the administration to interfere in a criminal prosecution, either to charge someone or not charge someone, and urging the Department of Justice to do one or the other. It ought not in any way be attempting to influence this merger review and the antitrust division of the Department of Justice.
Executives at CNN and AT&T have suspected this for a long time. They've suspected that Trump was interfering, but suspicions are not enough. There's got to be evidence. Right now, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, but nothing concrete. Do you believe you'll actually be able to find a smoking gun email or text message or something?
Well, we certainly have a responsibility to look at. Look, I raised my own concerns about the merger. So setting aside the merits of this, it is clear that the president cannot interfere or attempt to interfere to either reward his friends or punish his perceived enemies. This is sort of reminiscent of the Nixon days with the ITT case. So we have a responsibility to call in witnesses, to make document requests, to get at the truth. We need to protect the rule of law in this country and make sure people have confidence that this is being done in an appropriate way, pursuant to the appropriate guidelines in the Department of Justice in this sort of quasi-judicial kind of proceeding, and not and free from any political interference. So we've requested initially documents. If we are compelled to, we'll issue subpoenas. We'll certainly bring witnesses in. But we're going to get to the bottom of this and make sure that we can ensure the American people that we are not permitting any political interference by the president or members of his administration to punish people he perceives as enemies and to reward friends. It's completely inappropriate.
And he also perceives the Washington Post to be an enemy. He's criticized Jeff Bezos, who owns the Post and runs Amazon. Are you also looking into his attacks on Amazon?
You know, we have, this was a proposed merger where DOJ had a particular function. But I think you're right. There's been a persistent attack on the rule of law, on a free press, important democratic institutions. We're going to look at all these issues.
I see. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up here, former Fox News executive, then White House aide Bill Schein.
A night of CNN presidential town halls, tonight starting at 7 Eastern on CNN.
Does anybody want to be President Trump's next communications director? I mean, look at the polls. Most Americans believe Trump committed crimes before he took office. And not only that, most Americans recognize that the president is not trustworthy. And most people think that most minds are made up about the president, that most people aren't going to change their opinions no matter what new information comes out. So if you're the person tasked with improving Trump's image, maybe you haven't been doing such a great job. Or maybe it's out of your hands entirely. Either way, I'm guessing that the job that Bill Schein had is going to remain vacant for a while. Bill Schein, of course, was brought in, former Fox News co-president, to run the White House communications operation. He was a deputy chief of staff. But his departure was announced on Friday in like the worst possible communication style. The president was about to leave Washington to go visit that area in Alabama that had been devastated by tornadoes, and yet he stepped on that trip by announcing Shine's departure. I don't get it. Color me confused. But let's talk about it with Sarah Ellison, who's been covering Shine for a while now. She's a staff writer at the Washington Post. So we know that Shine's allegedly going over to the Trump campaign. They say he's going to be a senior advisor for the reelect, but nobody knows how real that job is or isn't.
Most of the people that I talk to say that's sort of a soft landing, face-saving job. That remains to be seen. It's key that whenever anyone leaves the Trump White House, they are sometimes given this kind of a role and continue to be paid as a way of kind of keeping them inside the tent.
What do you think it reveals about the president that he's gone through 5 or 6 communications chiefs at this point?
Well, he's gone through 5 or 6 communications chiefs and has found that job to be so important that he needs to keep refilling it. And yet he has left so many other key positions unfilled. It really says something about the way this president values his own media coverage and also his inability or unwillingness to address the policy issues that continue to make his media image unpopular with a lot of people.
Yeah, if he's going to try every day to please Ann Coulter and Sean Hannity, and right now he's yelling about Coulter and insulting her on Twitter, then how are you going to get through the rest of the country?
Well, I think that Shine really knew the Fox audience, and that's what he brought to the table as a kind of producer. He was not a strategist. He was not someone who knew how to try to appeal to other sectors of the population. Trump already had the Fox audience. And to speak about Ann Coulter for a second, you can either have Ann Coulter like you, or you can try to broaden the tent.
You can't do both.
You can't do both, and Trump keeps turning back to pleasing Ann Coulter. Shine was not somebody who was ever going to be able to see around those kinds of corners and try to do. No one could do this job. I mean, that's the biggest point of the conversation is that this is a losing proposition. Nobody would want to try to do it. But Bill Shine was not the kind of person who was going to change the game for this president. The biggest things that he was able to do was to do these not these rose garden, but these on the front lawn of the White House. He would tape interviews with Trump where Trump would do web videos that would be put out. He banned Caitlin Collins from a Rose Garden event. That was one of the first things that he did.
He apparently advocated for Acosta's press pass to be yanked also.
Exactly.
And he limited press briefings. Let's put on screen
He
our
canceled
count.
press briefings. Essentially,
41 days without a White House daily press briefing. These briefings used to be daily.
Right.
And under Shine, they become even less frequent.
Exactly. Now, the other thing is that people, Jane Mayer's article was a tour de force, but the signs were there that Shine was out with the president for a long time. The fact that he was at CPAC instead of going to Vietnam was something that was a real tell. The fact that he went on vacation during the shutdown was something that really irked the president, and according to my sources. He should have stayed there by the president in the White House, just sort of adding moral support. So this was a relationship that was deteriorating for some time.
But as you said, it's an impossible job. Look at this week's headlines. Paul Manafort sentenced to only 4 years in prison. I know that a lot of journalists are rightly shocked by the leniency of that sentencing. But for fun for a minute, if Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman was being sent to jail,
well, you don't even need to stop.
Imagine the smoke coming out of the heads on Fox News. It's impossible to imagine, and that's the situation Trump is in.
Well, we've never had a sitting president that is under investigation both by a special prosecutor and the SDNY, and had many of his very close associates found guilty of very bad behavior. So Michael Cohen's testimony alone would be something that would be insurmountable for someone who's a sitting president to kind of, or a communications director to change the discussion away from that. So it's of course it's an impossible job. This says much more about this presidency and this president than it does about the person who's sitting in that job. But I think that, I agree with you. No one's going to be signing up for that anytime soon.
Anytime soon.
And I can't imagine what they would do if they got there.
Sarah, thanks for being here. Great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
And speaking of Sarah's, Sarah Isker, the former Justice Department spokeswoman who is hiring by CNN, stirred a lot of controversy last month, is no longer taking a job as political editor in the Washington Bureau. Instead, she's going to be a political analyst here on CNN, sharing her insights on TV segments and on CNN.com. So a bit of a resolution to that controversy, including a lot of the concern internally about her new role. Some of the folks who were critical criticizing her hiring as an editor are reacting by saying that this arrangement makes a lot more sense. Coming up here on Reliable Sources, syndicated columnist and journalism professor Connie.
Or call 855-440-WAVE right now and save 40% plus get probiotic keto-friendly shakes free.
The story this week wasn't so much about who's running for president, but who isn't. Several people deciding not to run, including Eric Holder, Michael Bloomberg, and Sherrod Brown, all announcing they're deciding not to take a run at the 2020 nomination. I'm here with Connie Schultz. She's a journalism professor at Kent State University, where I recently visited. She's a syndicated columnist and, coincidentally, Sherrod Brown's wife. Connie, thanks for coming on. You were inside one of these decisions. I think you probably wanted your husband to run. What is it like to be on the inside and see all of us on the outside guessing about what's going to happen and what's he going to do?
Well, it's quite an experience, not one I've had before, even being married to a Senate candidate. I will say I was really, really happy overall with media coverage. One of the things I want to remind all these Democrats who are running right now is that every stop where they're being covered, they've had an entire staff get them there, where all these reporters and photographers are just schlepping all their own stuff. They're driving themselves. They're clearly more tired than we are at the end of any long day, and I wish we would keep that in mind.
Because it's a day that ends in Y, the President of the United States is attacking the media on Twitter. Today he's saying the media is the most hostile and corrupt in the history of American politics. I just wonder how you think other politicians, including your husband, should respond to those kinds of attacks and handle those kinds of attacks.
Well, I think one of the best ways to respond to it is to give full access to journalists. And it struck me a number of times we were asked by journalists, so when are you going to shut down all this access? Because we tend to gab with them at the airport. We would talk with them offline because we're all hanging out together. And that was instructive to me, because it meant that most candidates do that. And I think one of the best ways you show that you really mean it when we say we don't agree that journalists are the enemy of the people, which is what Donald Trump has been saying, is to act like we mean it. And these journalists are trying to do their job. I realize I'm a fellow journalist talking about it, but I feel this so strongly. The only coverage really that I object to, and it's just small, but it's irked me a tiny bit, was after Sherrod announced he wasn't going to get in. And a number of pundits and a couple of journalists have said that he had clearly spoken to Joe Biden. He and Joe Biden have not spoken since last October. The only time we heard from the Biden campaign was when one of his camp called our campaign and complained that they accused us of planting a story that had favorably contrasted Sherrod to Joe Biden. We had nothing to do with that story. And it's also insulting to the journalists working on it. They really can think for themselves. I think that's a bad look, bad form. I hope nobody does that anymore. You don't need to be attacking other candidates. You don't need to be accusing them of trying to undermine you. Just run your best race and be accessible to the journalists.
Right. It's kind of simple in that way. Putting on your journalism professor hat, today is the start of something called Sunshine Week. It's a campaign lots of newsrooms engage in to encourage government to be more transparent. And to mark Sunshine Week, here's an unfortunate, it's a sad and true headline from the Associated Press about the sunsetting of local papers, saying town by town, local journalism is dying in plain sight. Are you and your husband noticing this on the local level there in Ohio?
I used to work for the Plain Dealer, as you know, for almost 2 decades. It's not even delivered daily right now. We saw this in town after town. I loved meeting local journalists. We were certainly meeting some, but we were mostly covered by national media. And I know from being a regional journalist and staying in Cleveland, writing nationally from the city and from the state, how much we're harmed when we don't have that access. And part of the problem here, Brian, I know you've been talking about this in the past. When you've got a president who is demonizing the media, that trickles down to a lot of public officials around the country. All of a sudden, you got a mayor calling journalists the enemy of the people. You got members of Congress calling this that, right? You got the county commissioner saying, I don't have to give you information, which he or she surely must give to us. And constituents have a right to see that information and to know what's going on. So without the local reporters, first of all, just their numbers diminishing, but also they need the backing of their editors and their publishers to really push for that, because that is part of what it means to be a journalist in this country.
Right. Let the sunshine in, but we need folks who are in those newsrooms and be employed and have a business model that gives them the time to go down to the county courthouse and get those documents and report on them. Connie, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Quick programming note here. It's a night full of 2020 town halls on CNN. Here's the lineup from 7 till 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Jake Tapper and Dana Bash moderating, starting at 7, live from Austin at South by Southwest.